And in Garfield Park, 2 people shot at Lake in Central Park. One is in good condition, the other serious. Both of those shooting scenes happening in just the last hour.
Start tonight with breaking news from the city's west side. A fatal shooting inside a liquor store. This is in the 200 block of North Pulaski, so that's the Garfield Park neighborhood.
Tonight, we are seeing disturbing new video of a deadly shooting inside a West Garfield Park liquor store. CBS 2's Sabrina Franza is live.
This morning, groups representing the Fulton Market area will demand 200 new police cameras in the neighborhood. They will raise their concern about rising crime during a city council finance committee.
Welcome to the heart of Chicago's West Garfield Park, where danger lurks around every corner. This neighborhood isn't just any ordinary place. It's earned a chilling reputation as America's most dangerous hood, a title that even the police fear to challenge. With a staggering rate of 116.56 violent crimes per 1,000 residents, this isn't a statistic to be taken lightly. Imagine walking down the street, constantly looking over your shoulder, never knowing if you'll make it home safely. That's the reality for the people of West Garfield Park. From robberies to shootings, the streets here are like a battleground where danger seems to be ever present.
This morning, groups representing the Fulton Market area will demand 200 new police cameras in the neighborhood. They will raise their concern about rising crime during a city council finance committee.
But why is this neighborhood so dangerous? What factors contribute to its alarming crime rate? Is there any hope for change? Or are residents condemned to live in fear indefinitely? These are the questions we'll explore as we delve into the depths of America's most treacherous community. So buckle up and brace yourself for a journey into the heart of darkness, where the streets are ruled by violence and fear. Welcome to West Garfield Park, where danger is just another part of daily life. Once upon a time, way back in the 1800s, this place we now call West Garfield Park was just fields and farms, with no big towns or cities around. But then, in 1869, Chicago gobbled it up and made it part of the city. They even gave it a fancy name, Central Park. A few years later, in 1873, the railroad came to town and set up some shops. That meant jobs, and when there are jobs, people come. So, folks from Ireland and Scandinavia started moving in, building houses and starting businesses. Central Park soon became West Garfield Park, named after President Garfield, who sadly got shot. But most folks just called it Garfield Park. There was this cool park in Garfield Park that people loved. They even had a fancy club there that turned into a racetrack. But then, some troublemakers started illegal gambling, and that caused problems. The police shut down the racetrack in the 1890s, but the taverns along Madison Street kept the party going. Things really picked up around the year 1900 when lots of factories opened up, giving jobs to thousands of folks. One of the biggest was Sears Roebuck. They built a massive building nearby, making the area even busier. Madison Street became a hotspot for businesses, almost like a downtown. The 1920s were the best. West Garfield Park was booming, and everyone was feeling good. But then, the Great Depression hit in the 1930s, and times got tough. People lost their jobs, and the neighborhood started falling apart. In the 1940s, some folks wanted to fix things up, but others decided to leave for the suburbs. A few African-American families moved in, and some folks got worried that the neighborhood would change too much. Plans to make things better had to wait. During the mid-1950s, white greaser gangs began to dominate these streets. The Seminoles, the Lords, and the Rebels were the main greaser gangs that emerged on these streets and viciously fought each other for dominance. Members of the Lords were known for their sideburns and ducktail haircuts. In 1959, white residents tried to fight to keep black people out by forming the United Property Group. But the liberal Garfield Park Good Neighbors Council opposed them and wanted black people to have equal opportunity. Most of West Garfield Park was opposed to allowing heavy white flight and letting blockbusting to win over the neighborhood, and while other South Side and West Side communities fell victim very quickly to white flight and blockbusting. As more whites moved out in the early 1960s at a much higher pace, the white greaser gangs dissolved by 1959, and the first black gang emerged called the Muscaleros that formed at Wilcox and Pulaski. This gang fought some of the last of the greaser elements in the neighborhood. By the early 1960s, the Jive 5 gang and the Black Pimps emerged, and by the mid-1960s, they dominated the neighborhood and wiped out the Muscaleros. By 1963, the white middle class and white working class gave up on investing and believing in this neighborhood's future as they let block-busting real estate agents take advantage of them, making white flight a devastating reality between 1963 and 1965, until it completely ran its course by 1965, and the neighborhood was over 90% black. In 1965, tragedy struck when Dessie Mae Williams lost her life in a neighborhood accident, sparking outrage in the community. Back then, the area was mostly African American, but the fire department didn't have any black firefighters. People felt they were treated unfairly because of their skin color. Miss Williams' death, caused by a drunk fireman, was the last straw. Anger boiled over into violence. The incident led to violence, with buildings destroyed and businesses fleeing, leaving the community struggling economically. Then, in 1967, gangs like the Supreme Gangsters moved in, starting conflicts with other groups like the Vice Lords and Jive 5s. They took control by force, causing even more problems. The following year, the neighborhood faced more destruction during riots after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. Efforts to improve the area failed as it was seen as a slum. The once bustling Madison and Pulaski intersection suffered greatly. Amidst this chaos, the Four Corner Hustlers emerged in 1968 near Garfield Park. Fueled by the crimes of other gangs, they vowed to protect their territory fiercely. They claimed a section bounded by Madison, Jackson, Hamlin, Independence, and Pulaski as their own, becoming a dominant force in the area. The Four Corner Hustlers, a band of fighters ready to defend their turf from any rival gang daring to encroach upon their territory. At Dingno Playground, amid the whispers of Springfield and Wilcox, the Four Corner Hustlers forged their code. No drugs, no mugging, no burglaries. But when it came to stealing from delivery trucks or lifting from stores, that was fair game. And violence against rival gangs, completely acceptable. As the Supreme Gangsters began their West Side campaign in 1967, the Four Corner Hustlers stood firm, refusing to let their domain be overrun. Then came the fateful Valentine's Day dance of 1972. Officer Arnold tried to maintain order, but when Freddie Gage resisted, chaos erupted. Here is how it all went down. Officer Henderson Arnold told everyone they must have a membership card to stay at the dance. In the basement, 18-year-old Freddie Gage was the one that did not have an invitation, and Officer Arnold told him to leave when he refused. A struggle happened between the officer and Gagged, which resulted in Arnold's gun firing off, which caused a bullet to hit Officer Arnold in the face and neck afterwards. Leo Walker came up with his .22 caliber and started shooting at Arnold, while Freddie Gage and Walter Wheat tackled him, according to the court documents, as officer. Arnold tried to escape. He was being shot at. Arnold survived and needed surgery to repair the damages as he was shot 3 times. In the aftermath, Freddie Gage, dubbed King Freddie, found himself sentenced to a decade behind bars for attempted M. It was a turning point for the Four Corner Hustlers, thrust into the spotlight for the first time. Unlike other gangs, they didn't rely on drugs to line their pockets. Instead, they hustled, robbing trucks, hitting stores, but always with a code of honor. Their legend grew on the West Side, but they never strayed from their four corners. But then, one of their leaders, Walter Wheat, got locked up for causing trouble. Without him around, things started changing. See, there was this drug trade going on, but Walter and his buddy Freddie said no to it. But when they were out of the picture, another gang, the Black Souls, saw an opportunity to expand their turf. This Wayne Edwards guy, also known as Jack Bobo, came in with his crew, wanting to make some money. So they made a deal. The Four Corner Hustlers and the Black Souls joined forces to take on rival gangs like the Vice Lords and the Supreme Gangsters. Together, they formed what they called the 440 Plus. Now, the Four Corner Hustlers were getting into the drug game, slowly but surely. They couldn't go big right away, though, because they had to stay under the radar with their leaders locked up. But as the money rolled in, they started spreading out. They moved into the Austin neighborhood, where there was already some tension between different gangs. The Vice Lords, who were big shots there, let the Four Corner Hustlers join them, but only if they played by their rules. So, the Four Corner Hustlers became kind of like Vice Lords on the streets, but still kept their own identity. It was a tough decision, but they needed the protection offered by the Vice Lords Alliance, and that's how the Four Corner Hustlers went from being a small crew to a big player in the Austin community, all because they knew how to adapt and survive in the streets. They grew to over 18,000 members, and plus many members still pay homage to Walter W., Angelo Roberts, and Monroe Banks. Now let's talk about the original Black Souls. The gang formed because of so many problems they had with Vice Lords. The traveling Vice Lords were Four Corner Hustlers' worst enemy. There were TVLs all over original Black Soul members' hood around Madison and California, and the TVLs were by the Fours at Madison and Springfield area. The original Fours and first-generation Black Souls bonded over hatred of TVLs, Jive Fives, Supreme Gangsters, and Black P. Stones trying to settle North Lawndale. Back in those days, tensions ran high between various gangs like the TVLs, Jive Fives, Supreme Gangsters, and Black P. Stones, all scrambling for territory in North Lawndale and West Garfield Park. The Black Souls, as they were then known, found themselves in a fierce feud with the Supreme Gangsters over turf, resulting in a bloody conflict that spilled onto the front pages of newspapers. But it was the death of their founder, Horace King Pee Wee Willis, that transformed the Black Souls into the Mad Black Souls. Willis, caught in a robbery attempt, met his end at the hands of the police in a manner that left a scar of injustice on the community. Despite being unarmed and fleeing, Willis was gunned down mercilessly, receiving over 30 bullets in his back, an act of brutality that went unnoticed by the media and unpunished by the law. Fueled by rage and a thirst for vengeance, the Mad Black Souls rose from the ashes of tragedy, their name etched into the annals of Chicago's violent history. They embraced a new identity, one marked by aggression and a willingness to resort to any means necessary to assert their dominance. In the wake of Willis's death, the Mad Black Souls turned to drug dealing as a means of survival and power. Their clashes with rival gangs like the Four Corner Hustlers intensified as they fought to carve out their place in the unforgiving streets of Chicago. By 1972, the Mad Black Souls had earned a reputation as one of the city's most feared and notorious gangs, mentioned alongside the likes of the Latin Kings, Black P. Stones, Vice Lords, and Supreme Gangsters. After the death of Pee Wee, William Earl Weaver took over the Black Souls from the 1969-1975. But as Weaver's era came to a close by 1975, a new chapter began. One that would transform the Black Souls from a notorious gang into a well-organized entity focused on profits. With Weaver out of the picture, the Black Souls underwent a significant reorganization. In 1975, they merged with the Soul Brothers, birthing the Black Soul Brothers. This move not only solidified ties between the two groups, but also gave rise to the Gangster Black Souls. Now, by the year 1975, a money-making Supreme Gangster Wayne Jack Bobo Edwards decided to flip to a Black Soul while still maintaining strong ties to the Supreme Gangsters for money purposes. This would be an arrangement that was mutually beneficial for the Supreme Gangsters and for the Black Souls, and now Edwards was able to establish the Gangster Black Souls in 1975. The Mad Black Soul name continued, but this time as a faction, as these souls were well established in both East and West Garfield Park. and they settled in southern Austin by the Four Corner Hustlers. These black souls would eventually obtain a strong relationship with Four Corner Hustlers, as mentioned earlier. By the year 1993, the black souls were being targeted by law enforcement for selling millions of dollars worth of drugs in the streets. The souls were a major threat because of their complex drug trade and their propensity for violence if their drug turf was to be infringed on. During the 1990s, law enforcement and the media focused on Whitey Jack Bobo Edwards, as he was known to be connected to the Chicago outfit and was a big-time drug dealer. There was even a saying drug addicts would sing a song as a parody to the popular George Michael's hit song, "Wake Me Up Before You Go, Go, I Need to Buy More Dope," from our boy Jack Bobo. Jack Bobo would eventually face incarceration for some time, then eventually retire from the street life in more recent years. Now, in the heart of neighborhoods burdened by poverty and racial injustice, a group of young boys came together to defy the odds. Their story, the history of the Gangster Disciple Nation, is one of resilience, unity, and the quest for justice. Picture this. It's 1958, and in the streets of Hyde Park, Kenwood, and Englewood, tensions run high. Wealthier white youths bully their black counterparts, fueling a fire of resentment and frustration. But instead of succumbing to fear, a group of brave young souls decides to fight back. These boys, aged just 11 to 13, form a club with a purpose: to stand up against injustice and protect their communities. Drawing inspiration from the Bible, they adopt the name Disciple, adding devils for a touch of intimidation. Thus, the seeds of the Gangster Disciple Nation are sown. Led by figures like Richard Champ Strong and David Barksdale, the Disciples waste no time in making their presence known. Their headquarters at 53rd and Kimbark in Hyde Park became a stronghold, a symbol of their unity and determination. Their first adversaries? The Sons of Italy, a white gang resisting the changing demographics of Englewood. But the Disciples are undeterred, facing off against not only white gangs, but also rival black groups like the Egyptian Cobras. As the years pass, the Disciples expand their territory, from Woodlawn to South Shore, from Greater Grand Crossing to Washington Park. Wherever there's poverty and oppression, they stand tall, offering protection and support to their fellow black communities. By 1961, under the leadership of David Barksdale, the Disciples reached new heights of power, especially in northern Englewood. White flight paves the way for their dominance as more black families move in, swelling their ranks and strengthening their resolve. But their journey is not without challenges. Gentrification threatens their presence in Hyde Park and Kenwood, pushing them further into Englewood. Yet, even in the face of adversity, they stand firm, solidifying their stronghold at 63rd and Stewart. Meanwhile, in the Cabrini Green projects, Richard Strong forms the Black Deuces, another arm of the growing disciple movement. His influence spreads rapidly, attracting more youths to the cause. The Disciples didn't stop there. They extended their reach into the south suburbs, facing similar racial conflicts. In places like Harvey, Dixmoor, and Chicago Heights, they stood firm against injustice, often finding themselves at odds with rival groups like the Blackstone Rangers. But their resolve remained unshaken. Racial strife wasn't just about words or boundaries, it was about systematic discrimination. Black students faced bullying in schools and unequal treatment from teachers and authorities. Unfair neighborhood boundaries confined them to certain areas where they were subject to discrimination and violence. The police, too, often targeted them unfairly. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, the Gangster Disciples were big players in the crack coke scene. They ran their operations in places like the Robert Taylor Homes, Cabrini Green, Dearborn Homes, and Stateway Gardens. Imagine soldiers working non-stop, 24/7, selling crack like it was going out of style. They had a tight grip on these public housing buildings, even searching residents and imposing curfews to control the drug trade. In places like Cabrini Green, it was like living under military rule. Gangsters had to gather every night for exercises. Breaking rules wasn't an option. It meant serious consequences, even death. Armed to the teeth, they patrolled the hallways, making sure their drug sales thrived. And thrive they did. The gangster disciples made a K-ing, both in money and power, thanks to neglected housing projects and a steady stream of recruits, kids looking for a way out of poverty. But it wasn't just about drugs and violence. There's a different side to the gangster disciples, one rooted in activism since the 60s. They preached about family, community, and being better men. Some of the older members, once involved in serious crimes, now speak out about true leadership and protecting their neighborhoods. Yet despite this message, the gangster disciples today are torn apart by internal conflict. Factions fight each other as much as their rivals, spreading violence and chaos throughout the city and suburbs. Before the demolition of places like Cabrini Green and Robert Taylor homes, the gangster disciples were raking in millions from drugs every year. Their numbers swelled to over 35,000 members. But now, with infighting and chaos, it's hard to see where they'll end up. And that's all for today. Until next time, peace out.